My name's Liesl Eberhardt. A lot of you know me. I think you're in a few of my classes, so I appreciate you supporting this event by coming out as well. I want to kind of talk about a few things before we welcome our guest this evening. To start, according to Harvard Business Review, 13% of current working engineers are women. And despite initiatives by our STEM programs to increase those numbers, 40%, this is also by Harvard Business Review, 40% of our women in the field are leaving after being in the field, and this is for a number of complex reasons. There's a study out of MIT, and this is by sociologist Susan Silby. And she has researched some of these. This was a National Science Foundation funded research that was done over a period of time. And some of these reasons are incredibly complex as well. These included, and I'm going to say the name of this study, and it has, for some reason when I say this, it's kind of a tongue twister, so let me kind of attempt to give you the title of this so you can check it out. Persistence is cultural. Professional socialization and the reproduction of sex segregation. Now try saying that like 10 times fast right now. But that's the name of the study. She concluded that some of these reasons, probably not surprising to some of you, include that women feel marginalized, or self-report feeling marginalized from classroom to internships to their experiences on the job. And they also report that once they get into the workplace, they tend to be passed up for the more challenging projects in favor of their male counterparts. They tend to be given more simple managerial and routine tasks in their jobs, and therefore they're leaving. They're kind of dropping out of the workplace at larger numbers. And there's other complex reasons that some of them are going to be discussed tonight in response to the memo that was in the title of tonight's talk. And also we have poor parental leave policies in the U.S. and work-family balance is an issue not just in engineering but across the board in fields. So tonight we are in for a treat. Melissa Aquino is visiting us, and I'm going to give you a little bit of information about our guest tonight. But we're going to kind of talk about some of these issues, some of these stories about women in this field, and we're going to kind of share some of these. And it's going to be an interactive, what Melissa wanted to call a fireside chat. So if you were feeling a little chilly, hopefully that makes it feel a little more cozy. All right? I want to share a little bit and then say a few words before I get into this bio, so if you'll kind of bear with me. Our guest is a woman who has worked in the field of engineering for over 20 years. She's with us to share her journey, her stories, her Mr. Google Manifesto response, and some of the feedback she's received since writing it. She'll share her leadership lessons learned, including successes and failures. We want a respectful discussion tonight about these issues, and as I said, kind of like a fireside chat. Before I do talk about this bio, I want to do something very important, and that is thank my brother, who I love dearly and is sitting in the front row. And it would not be possible for this event to have happened had he not texted me and said, my college roommate wrote this incredible response, and I want you to read it. So let's give it up for my brother. And he is a mechanical engineer with a firm called Backsupport. So maybe he'll share some stories with us as well. No pressure. And I also was told that in their late 80s college dorm days, maybe we can get some stories out of them about that as well, what was going on there. He was a big Duran Duran, no embarrassment there whatsoever. Just own it. They don't know who it is. Well, I have been reading 80 use pop culture in my ethical leadership class, so they get to revisit a lot of that.
Duran is acceptable.
Ready Player One. Ready Player One. Yeah, and Duran making a comeback? I don't know. You too, still. So that's when Bono has that legendary mullet. Before now. All right, so Melissa joins us from Danaher Business Systems Office, where she's VP of Business Systems Operation, responsible for strategy, execution, mentorship, training, and collaboration across leadership, innovation, commercial, and lean pillars of the organization. So she takes care of a lot. She's busy. And she is a member of the Office of the Chief Executive and has been with Danaher for 16 years, serving as product manager, VP of R&D, VP of Marketing, Human Resources Director, General Manager, and President. And this is a Fortune 200 company, all right? So we're going to get some great perspective on what she does in this corporate world and get really a vision into what goes on. She's worked in 3 different geographies in the U.S. and Germany with 2 different operating companies as sub-companies of Danaher, Micrometer and Hatch. She started her career at Procter & Gamble in product development as a process engineer and upstream product researcher for dish products. These would include Cascade and Dawn. As a chemical engineer, she was responsible for manufacturing scale-up as well as identifying new product concepts and customer insights via quantitative and qualitative market research. She holds a BS in chemical engineering from the Colorado School of Mines and an MBA from CU Boulder Leeds School of Business. She lives in Colorado with her husband of 25 years. She has, wait for it, 5 children, ranging in age from 22 to 4. So busy? Busy. She enjoys reading, traveling, and spending time with her family. Let's give a very, very warm thanks and welcome to Melissa for spending an evening with us.
Thank you. All right.
Thanks so much.
Mic okay still? All right, so I have some slides here, but I'm going to use them to storytell mostly. Feel free to interrupt me. Nothing is too controversial. I'm willing to entertain any of it. After 25 years in the business, I've heard it all. So there's nothing you're going to say that will make me feel uncomfortable probably up here. So the title of my story I call Own Your Journey and Make It Visible. And I'm really passionate about that. I'm not going to stand up here and tell you all my successes. I'm going to share my failures. I'm going to share kind of how I stumbled along and ended up where I'm at, and why the heck I have 5 kids and how that happened and came about. So hopefully you find it interesting, and I like to think that I won't be so unique maybe in the world in another 10 years, that there's a full array of choices that women can make. And so you're going to see one story from me, but I am a big proponent of the full range of femininity. You know, and you want to stay home, you want to work, you want to have no kids, you want to have 5 kids. It just should all be allowed in our family choices. So with that, I actually brought a couple books that I absolutely love that are sort of my Bibles, and one of them, which is written by Greg McKeown, it's called The Disciplined Pursuit of Less. Highly recommend in our busy lives you all read that. But he has a quote in here at the bottom: I have a vision of people everywhere having the courage to live a life true to themselves instead of the life others expect of them. And I just think that's so critical, especially as we think about women's journeys. A couple bullets up here is one of the best gifts we can give to each other. I've given this talk a lot to women's groups, so in particular to women, is to just share what's real. Just be real. You know, what's worked, what hasn't, where have you failed, what do you wish, what are your regrets, and share those successes and with others, and then inspire you to own your own journey. I tell my kids this. I have actually a 24-year-old now. That bio was a while ago. 24, 22, and 19, and I tell my children, it's your journey, it is not mine. Own it, love it, make it true to you. So this is me. Can't really see very well, okay? But this is me and my sister in about 1981. And the funny thing is, I actually showed this to my 19-year-old daughter before I came here, and she said, man, look how you're standing. You got that. I'm going to go kick somebody's, you-know-what and race them down the street. And that's really the kind of kid I was. I was very much a tomboy, grew up in the 80s, but I grew up in a very blue-collar family. My father was a night crew foreman at King Soopers. He stocked the groceries, hated management, hated anybody in management. He did not want to work in the daytime, so we had no risk of running into them. My mother watched other working moms' kids in our house. She had a daycare in our house. And they really needed, both incomes to make it work. So I grew up hearing a lot about those working moms. There were no women in my family that I knew went to college. You got married at 18 and you had a kid by 20. My mom grew up in a town of 500 people in Nebraska, and my dad grew up in a town of 200 in Kansas. My mom's older sister is married to my dad's older brother because the pool was very small. So that's the background. When I was born in 71, women contributed 4% to household income. They're projecting, and the stats here, I feel guilty coming to college and I didn't put my source down at the bottom here, but the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics is saying that, for dual earning homes, it was 42% about a year ago, and they think it'll be over 50%. That's really when it's going to crack in 2018. Okay, these are dual income homes, what women are going to contribute. So the background there was, when I was born, it was sort of, hey, guess what, women, now you can go be anything you want. You don't have to be just a secretary or a nurse or these specific jobs. You really can go be anything you want. But good luck, there aren't a lot of them doing it yet. So I think that my generation was really the first one to have to kind of go into the thicket and see what that was really like. When I was a kid, like I said, I was a huge tomboy. I just identified with boys. I played with boys. I was this size at 12. That's when I was like, all right, picking football teams out on the playground. I'm one of the quarterbacks, and I always was. And I was one of the team captains. And I remember then all of a sudden, about the end of my 6th grade year, I'm 12. I was good at football. I remember sitting at dinner with my dad begging to play pads because all the guys were going to go play pads. And my dad saying, what? He grew up in a family of all boys. He said, girls don't play football. Stop it. Just stop it. So at the end of my 6th grade year, they made a rule that girls can't play with boys on the football field because who knows what could happen out there. Well, guess which girls that affected? Me, one of us. So I remember standing at the top of the football field, and there was sort of this black top, and I'm just fuming. And I'm standing there watching them play, thinking, why can't I play? This is stupid. And I sat there and I'm like, well, they're jumping rope back here. Okay, that is not me. I am not a jump roper. And the basketball court's empty. So I literally looked at the court and I said, I'm going to have the best left-hand layup by the time the season starts. And that's what I did. And I just started playing basketball. And so, the lesson for me in these very early years, there's a lot of drag forces out there. And there's this funny line between, good grief, why doesn't corporate America or why doesn't our society fix these drag forces, but yet why don't women stay more empowered in this weird tightrope we're all talking about? And I'm a big believer it's both, but at that time I'm like, I'm going to control what I can control. I'm going to go play some hoops. So I start marching through, about this time too, I was told, when I was about 10, I guess, that I was average at math by my male 4th grade teacher. And they had these cool new Rubik's Cubes, but you weren't allowed to touch them unless you were advanced. And those kids even stayed in at recess to play with those things. And I remember looking in the window going, oh, I want to play with that thing, but I was not allowed. So I'm thinking I'm bad at math about 10. I didn't feel bad at math, but I was told I was bad. I was average. So by 6th grade, about the time of the football story, we took some standardized tests, and I came in as advanced, unbeknownst to me, So I go into 6th grade, or I go into middle school in honors math, and start doing really well in math. Decided to take physics and chemistry as an 8th grader, and I remember sitting at our table. I'm not sure my dad was completely awake because he's working nights at dinner, and I said, well, I'm going to sign up for chemistry and physics. And my dad said, well, why? Don't boys do that? What are you doing? I said, I don't know. I want to take that class. True story, the only B I ended up with in middle school was home economics. God, true. Because I just couldn't sew. I wasn't very good at that. So I just didn't fit, I felt like, in my family a lot growing up. So about 16, I take my first business class, and I'm thinking, you know, I like sciences, but what about business? And this guy, I don't think he'd ever been in business. He tells me, I have a B at the quarter, and I'm trying to get a scholarship to go to college, and I said, well, I don't think I have a B, look at my grades. And he literally looks at me, it was like just him and I, and he says, I just looked at your face, and you look like you deserve a B. And I said, we better look again, because I better have an A this semester, or you and me and my face are going to be in the principal's office. No, I didn't say it quite that harsh. I was actually very crushed. And I was like, really? Like, look at my grades, you know. So I act all tough, but I really wasn't. It was very crushing. End up, you know, my dad, we had no money for college. So my dad, you know, sits me down about 16. He says, if you want to go to school, good luck. Got no money for you. Don't know why you'd want to go. You seem smart, but whatever. And so I started to gun to try to get a scholarship so that I could go to Mines. My mom, meanwhile, I'm 16. I never had a boyfriend. And my mom keeps going, what is the plan? Clock is ticking. And I got married at 18, and I had 2 kids by 20. What are you doing? So I'm sitting there going, you know, am I supposed to have a boyfriend? I don't know. I'm starting to get a little paranoid. And then she's giving me this speech where you're not going to be one of those working women, are you? And tell me, for the love of sanity, you're not going to wait to have your kids later in life. Good grief, don't do that, because medically you'll be regretting that, and on and on. So I'm still married to my high school sweetheart, but here's the true story about that. So I decided that, you know, I needed a process to figure out who this boyfriend was going to be, because I was clearly behind. So I was babysitting one night, and I literally made a list of all the boys I knew. I had like 10 or 11 of them, friends, guys I've gone out with, whatever, and I had a matrix, criteria across the top. And I had a quantitative ranking of every single one of these guys, this is scary. I tell people, I'm very careful which men I tell this to, because this is terrifying to them, but I swear this method works, ladies, if you've never done it. So I did my quantitative analysis, and my husband came out number 1. He was really quiet, total jock guy, but he was pretty smart. He played basketball. So old school, you know, telephones, you know, with the coily, big old long coily receiver. I'm like, I dial him up. I said, hey, why don't you take me out Friday night? And he's like, on a date? And I said, yeah. He goes, okay, blink. And we've been together ever since. So, you know, that really worked. And he's really part of this whole journey and this whole story. So he's a year older than me. So I graduate high school, and I have a pretty big buildup on this first slide just to get you to where my career went. But I think the backstory is important. So I start off at Mines. I did get a scholarship. I got a Betcher scholarship to go to Mines. And, you know, I'm living in the dorms for the first year, and then I live with a group of girls the second year. Well, I have a chance, an internship between my sophomore and junior year to go work for Conoco in the Texas oil fields. And I really want to do it. And I'm afraid to go by myself, and I know my parents will flip out if I just take my boyfriend down there and we live together all summer. They're going to lose it. So I'm on the phone talking to my then boyfriend, and I said, well, I got this opportunity in Texas, and I really want to go. And he said, well, let's just get married. And I said, okay. And we decided over the phone. I called my mom up. I'm like, yeah, I'm getting married. I really didn't want a wedding. My mother was like, oh my gosh, you got to have a little something. And I said, okay, you plan it, you pick it, I show up, which she did. I don't remember my colors to this day. So I had finals on a Thursday, I got married on a Saturday, and I was in the Texas oil fields by Monday morning. We literally like unfurnished apart. I think we packed like a ping pong table and some weights and a few pans and head off to Texas. So I'm working for Conoco in the oil fields, and it's 45 miles outside of town, literally like, you know, the pumpers you see out there in the middle of nowhere, tarantulas, tumbleweeds, rattlesnakes. We're about 4 hours from the Mexican border. And my whole job description was, well, when the pumper gets out of the car, you get out of the car. That was my whole job description. But I'm like, this is a really lame internship. Sometimes they drop me off to like spray paint oil wells or clean guys' toolboxes. During this time, there was one guy, though, and I was out with these guys in the middle of nowhere for, you know, a whole day. And there was one guy who was very sketchy, and he wouldn't even go do his job. He just wanted to go drive to a park and have me play and swing all day with him, like play on the equipment. It's very odd, okay? So I'm like, dude, shouldn't we go check some oil wells? He's like, no, we're just gonna hang out at the park today. So kind of a little sketchy when you're, 20, out in the middle of nowhere. So, but I decided, Conoco had this like online program, you could learn about all the oil wells, and I passed all their little tests in the summer. So I go back to Midland, Texas, internship's over. I think, well, I did as good a job as I could have. I go up for my exit interview, and the guy sees my ring. And my husband's waiting in the car with anticipation. He's like, all right, she crushed this. What are they gonna say to her? And I'm sitting there, and he says, are you married? I said, yeah. And he goes, well, that's really too bad. Because in the oil business, we view our married ladies with less dedication. And my heart just dropped into my stomach. And the hard part about that moment is feeling like there's something wrong with me. And I remember walking out and feeling devastated to tell my husband because I felt like there was something wrong with us. And the crazy thing is the next summer they offered me offshore Louisiana, and I'm like, crap, are you kidding me? I'm not going to work. In fact, it's a cold day in hell when I will still stop at a Conoco station. So I still won't. So I'm graduating mines and end up graduating first in the number one in the chemical engineering class. And let me rewind. I did an internship the next summer for Procter & Gamble, which was outstanding. I love Cincinnati, and they were just a fantastic company. So they gave me an offer, a full-time offer at the end of the summer. So I went into my senior year with a job offer. Well, by this time, I am like, my family thinks it's just really awesome that they don't know why I'm getting a college degree. It's sort of this, pat me on the head, isn't it cute, she's still in school. So my mom's talking at me going, well, you've been married now a couple years. When are we having a kid? Like when is this happening? So I really didn't know. I really thought, well, I guess I need to be a stay-at-home mom at some point, but I don't know when this is going to happen. So I started talking to my husband. I'm like, well, maybe we should, have a kid. I don't know. So I ended up pregnant spring of my senior year. And I was pregnant walking across the stage of graduation. You couldn't tell yet. So I had a job with P&G. I showed up to my first job pregnant, which is also horrifying. But it's the test of I was so apologetic. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm a brand new intern. I gotta go tell them I'm pregnant. I went to HR right away and I said, hey, I'm gonna have a baby in about 7 months, maybe 8 months or so. And they said, great. It was this overwhelmingly welcome reaction. She said, let me go down and show you our new mother's room. And she walked down there and showed me the rocking chairs. And we have these industrial pumps. All you got to do is buy your little kit. We have a fridge down here. And by the way, while you're pregnant, if you're not feeling so well, we have some beds back here. Come take a nap. I'm like, well, am I covered? She's like, absolutely, you're covered. And I couldn't believe it. This is 20 years ago, right? And so I go in to meet with my boss, and there's this technician guy there. And he tells me that my job is to be part of a plant startup in 7 months in St. Louis. And I'm like, well, okay, good. I'm pregnant. And his reaction was just automatic. He says, no problem. I'm going to assume you can do your job unless you can't. The guy next to him, the technician guy, goes, can she do this job? Come on. And my boss says, you will never ask her that question again, and you will always assume she can. And I'm going to talk about that as it relates to my Dear Mr. Google manifesto later, of assuming women can do their jobs. There's a reality, a physicality to being pregnant, for sure. And I tell women on my team, man, there's this real biology going on right here. You take care of you, but I'm going to assume you can do your job. So that takes me to my next graph. Okay? That's a big old wind up to my background, but I think it's important to kind of understand the journey I was on. And then as I got more into the professional world, sort of what happened from there. Any questions so far before I get into the career part, the family part? Thoughts? No? I won't call on you. Okay. So because I'm an engineer, everything's on a graph for me. So this is my graph, and I'm going to talk through, you can see my professional and my kids. Boop, 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 boop. All right. So the thing I want to, I always share this to the right here. I'm going to talk about each one of these phases and what did I learn, sort of what happened in this journey. These are the titles I've held. And that blue bar in the middle, I was process engineer, products researcher, product manager, business unit director. I'm moving up, boom, I had a massive career crash, which I'm going to talk about. Restart, project manager, R&D manager, kind of restart, and then I'm now corporate vice president. And I'll talk about the fits and starts of this career. And honestly, a big theme of this struggle is this blue collar, am I a mom? Am I a breadwinner? What am I? Am I an engineer? Like, huge identity crisis. Since that football field, frankly, trying to figure that all out. So there's Cascade. My team actually named Cascade Complete and did all the branding work on that. Well, what I decided at P&G was, I'm like, okay, my husband, nobody in his family had ever gone to college either. And I wanted him to get a college degree so he had it. So we waited till I graduated and I was at P&G and I had a job so that he could go back to college at a Cincinnati University. So I'm thinking, okay, well, you know what? While he's getting a degree so that he can be the breadwinner, I am like going to crank out kids while we got good benefits. That was my plan, God's honest truth. And I was like, all right, I'm doing 3 kids in 5 years, and here's the deal. And so, 20 months later after my first one, had the second one, and then 2.5 years later had the third one. So, so I did, the one plant startup, 7 months pregnant, steel-toed boots, 3rd shift, all union, crazy part of St. Louis, midnight shift going up and down stairs to take samples. I'm a new engineer. I know up and down these stairs, take these samples, run an analysis. Well, finally, these older guys are watching me, and they're just like, stop. And I was like, I can do my job. Finally, I realized, they just really genuinely cared about me. And it's okay to just be a pregnant woman for a minute. So I got a stool by my little weighing scale I was doing, and I put my feet up, and they said, let us do the hard work, you do the brain work. Quit getting those damn samples by yourself. So they went and got the samples and brought them to me, and I realized I had to kind of be okay. I wasn't going to be so tough the entire time. So, I did 3 kids in 5 years, quote, so then I could stay home. My husband was a full-time student. The thing I go back and look at this, and if I could tell me something, I'm a big believer of what would you tell yourself back then? I'd have said, just relax and celebrate the differences. They called me the pregnant girl almost the entire time I was there, literally. That was my nickname. Oh, the pregnant girl? Because I was the only woman in my entire team. I was the only woman in all those men. And, I was the pregnant girl. They could just call me the girl, but they had to call me the pregnant girl. So, but, it was a good time. So my husband graduates, and he's going to be a teacher. And we're realizing that my money, I can make more money than him. In fact, we've learned to live on my income. And he's like, I'm kind of looking at the money and what I can make as a teacher. And he really wanted to come back to Fort Collins. We were in Cincinnati at this time. I grew up in Fort Collins. He wanted to come back home. I want my parents to be near the kids. And so I was furious at this point. I was honestly very angry because I thought, well, now what the heck is my identity, right? Where's the dream? I'm supposed to be home. So I faxed my resume into Hawk. I'm like, whatever, screw it. They want me to come interview. I came and interviewed, and I hated the interview. And I literally walked out, and I looked at the mountains, and I called my husband up. I said, I'm not taking this job. He said, yeah, you will. Please, won't you, please? So I took the job. I kind of came kicking and screaming back to Colorado. But honestly, I was super angry at this stage and almost went a little into the hostile world of, all right, if I got to be the breadwinner, this is my game now. This is what we're going to do. So I work at Hawk for a while, and they talked me into going to get my MBA, the executive MBA there while I'm working full time. My husband was teaching because, he was teaching and coaching basketball. So we needed both our incomes to make it work. But the kids were we're shuttling the kids to his mom or my aunt or everywhere. And so I had a chance to go back, or my second year of my MBA, I said, would you quit? Will you just quit your job? Quit everything, please, and take care of the kids. And he did. And I thought, okay, I didn't have these kids to just shuttle them around to all these relatives. So things are going really well for me career-wise, and they asked me to move to Germany and take over for my boss. And we moved back home to be near grandparents, to be near family. My husband had never been out of the country. And I was like, hey, they want me to move to Germany, take over the whole thing. And we had this conversation. He's like, no, are you kidding me? We're not moving. We moved back home. And this is not what you want to do in your marriage, by the way. This is sort of a tense time. I literally said, pack your bags. I'm the breadwinner. We're moving to Germany now. Okay? Like, if I got to make the money, I call the shots. So his first time out of the country was house hunting in Germany. Okay? That was a very, very rough time, by the way. The hard part about that period was I moved the whole family, my older 3 kids, to a foreign country. My oldest came back fluent in German, which was phenomenal. But I had a team in France. I still had a team in the US. I traveled 26 out of 35 weeks, and I was making really poor choices. Like, I was struggling with, jet lag and time and trying to be superwoman. And I lived in Dusseldorf. We had a plant in Berlin, and this plant manager did not like me. And he did not like me coming and literally told me at one point, I don't need any effing American to tell me how to do this, let alone a woman. So I'm like, me and my flag will be on your doorstep Monday morning. So I was fighting with this guy in Berlin. And this comes out of that book again, is this essentialism is, you can do anything, but only a few things really matter, and you can't do everything. So my husband, one day, I'm thinking I'm going to get divorced. I mean, I'm mad at him. He's mad at me. I'm thinking, oh, we're cruising for a divorce here. Maybe we got married too young. Why did we get married so young? I'm starting to get resentful over Mom, and you've got to have a boyfriend, and, did I pick the right guy? And so we're sitting at a cafe in Dusseldorf on a Saturday morning, and my husband looks at me and he says, let's go back. Quit. I want you to walk off your job right now. We'll take the kids. We can leave everything here. I don't care if we have nothing. We'll go live with your sister, your parents. This is ridiculous. And he said, you know what? He goes, and if you want to divorce me, if there's a guy that you find you like better than me, I will stand up and shake his hand one day. I really will if he's good to my kids. But I will not watch you destroy yourself. And you're destroying yourself right now. And I called in Monday morning, and I went, I'm out of here. The awesome thing that happened, I've been with the same corporation now for 17 years. He's a CEO now. He was a president at the time. He was 2 levels ahead of me. Calls me up and he says, what's going on? He said, don't quit. Just take a leave of absence. By the way, one of our operating companies is 20 minutes from your sister. And to me at the time, I felt like I was like trying to go to AA, and somebody's like, there's a bar on the corner, So I was like, whatever, great. Honestly, my head was spinning. So I walked off my job, took like kind of a 6-month hiatus, and tried to figure out what life was all about. I was literally researching, do I want to be a masseuse? I mean, I thought, do I want to be a Starbucks barista? Maybe I'll live the final dream of staying home with the kids. What am I doing? Moved in with my baby sister, who's, a year younger than me. It was very humbling. And she had a Montessori school. So I spent being her assistant for 5 months, which was glorious. And I was like, but the assistants would be like, you don't cut the cucumbers quite right. And I wanted to scream, I ran a $250 million business. So, that was all fine and dandy. And I decided then that I really wanted a couple more kids. And I wanted kids because I wanted to have them, not on a crunch project of, I was 36 by this time. So I decided to have a baby that I chose, that I just wanted to have a baby. And so we did. And then I decided that, oh my gosh, that kid's going to drive us crazy if she didn't have a playmate. So we had another one. But during this time period, the economy crashed. My husband was teaching again. He lost his job at a private school. I was making part-time because I was still on this leave of absence thing. And I am like, if I don't go back to work, we lose everything. Like, there's no roof over our house. So I went back to work. And the really fun part, this little company out in California was part of our corporation. My boss was an amazing man. He's still a mentor to me today. because I was still wound so tight. And he sat right next to me. He was the president. And he'd come in my office and he'd say, he wouldn't talk about work with me at all for 2 weeks. He'd say, what do you think about Pilates? I go, I don't know. Do you do yoga? He'd say, what's your extreme self-care plan? You know, which I'd never heard this concept, you know, and so he really taught me how to take care of myself. I also, I didn't care what title I held. It was just like, you know what, I'll be a project leader, I'll be whatever, I really don't care. I grew up in a family where there were no titles, so call me what you wish. So I started, just really reflecting here, and the lesson here is okay to slow down, but just kind of collect skills as you go. So I just slowed down, and I just kind of learned to love business again. I learned to love what I was good at. I'd led nearly every function. I used to go into him and say, let me run customer service, let me run HR, let me run this. So that's how I collected all these experiences. And my husband became, I call it full-time lead parent, because full-time stay-at-home dad spells sad. Okay? So, and I got to tell you, guys who choose to stay home, there's a stigma there. Oh, were you unemployed? Are you unambitious? Are you lazy? Are you not really masculine? There's a whole stigma around that, especially for my generation. I like to believe that's really changing. I don't know. So, eventually I decided, you know what, I'm ready to get back in the game. Really am. And Danaher said, hey, would you like a bigger job? I said, yeah, I'm ready. What do you got? Well, this time my boss, been there 28 years, decided to retire. And so I became president of this company. All my peers now worked for me. I was the youngest one. They're all 10 years older than me. All white males at the time. So, and many of them, were great. I did end up replacing a couple of them and making a more diverse leadership team at the time. So the fun part of this is, one thing women wrestle with is, what is my leadership style? How do I describe myself? Because you see male, one pet peeve of mine is people say, well, can you work with her on her executive presence? Or what does that mean as a woman? You have to look male, be dominant. I don't have any issue with that. But what's my leadership style? And I started to call myself the grand matriarch. Because, and this is my philosophy, and I don't really cook, but imagine I did. I just tell people, you're in my house, I'm baking cinnamon rolls, I'm taking care of you, and I will make sure you are loved and you want to be in that house. But if I snap my fingers, you better get upstairs and clean your room, now. And if you're a bully in my house, I will kick you to the curb. There ain't no bullies in my house. We're going to treat each other with respect. So really discovered kind of who's the most authentic me? You'll hear women in the corporate world feeling like they have to, quote, put on a man suit. I want to be my most authentic me. So the last, piece of this story is I took this vice president corporate role. We decided to split our corporation. The guy who saved me out of Germany is now our CEO and just a wonderful person. And he called me up and he said, hey, would you like to come work for me and run the whole Danaher Business System office? I said, heck yeah, bring it. I'm excited. And I started to feel this duty to walk in a room and be present and speak to groups and show up as a woman in a top corporate role. Because if you're not visible, if you're not really there, and other women don't see it, it's like, well, what am I? They don't know what to aspire to. And I've been asked to be the executive sponsor for the Women and Friends Associate Resource Group. The funny thing was, back to the Dear Mr. Google Manifesto, you're probably wondering, when's she going to get to that? That funny thing about that crazy Dear Google Manifesto is, I was actually let me just go to the next one here. So there's me. I was actually in Brazil. And my daughter had been kind of following the Google stuff online. She's like, Mom, look at this guy. You got to read this thing. And it's so controversial. And it's 9 pages long. Anybody actually read his full manifesto? Okay? About 5 pages in, I'm kind of like, wow, this guy's, aren't some of these conversations okay to have? And he seems sort of sane. And I'm kind of with him. And I was actually in Brazil, like I said, on business. And so my daughter had asked me to read it. Well, about page 6 or 7, I'm like, whoa, mister, where are you going here? And he really went off the rails. around women choosing not to be in math and science. That, well, women can't really handle stress in the workplace. I'm like, you're sitting in Google, ping pong tables, nap pods, wheatgrass. Like, are you kidding me? This is stressful? What is stressful? How about the fact that women maybe aren't treated equally? That might be one source of stress. So, and the thing that really got me about this is this was this guy who hadn't, frankly, been in the journey I had been in, had not lived my experiences, is making these grandiose statements about women's choices. I happened to be in Brazil on my daughter's birthday. Oddly enough, my last two daughters were born on the exact same day. And I did not plan that. I don't know how that happened, but August 8th. So when I took this new big corporate role, I'm on the road 75% of the time. My husband and I had a really great conversation. I'm like, all right, are we good? Are we cool? Can we do this? And he's like, I'm all in. I'm lead parent. He kicks butt at the house, and he can tutor the kids and well, I shouldn't say the house, cooking. He's not good at the house. He does all the lead parent things really, really well. And I'm like, oh, I love what I do. And let me go be me and you be you. And he's like, yeah, it's awesome. Let's do it. So we had the ninja birthday party, right? The Sunday before I left. But on August 8th, I'm in Brazil. And I read that crazy guy's manifesto. I'm laying in my bed and I cannot sleep. I am losing it. So I have a very tiny Facebook group. Be careful what you do on social media. It really is real. A very, very tiny group, like 50 people by design. So I get up and I wrote, Dear Mr. Google Manifesto. I'm not going to reread it to you, but it's a lot of the journey, the pieces I told you. And I just wrote it for me. I wrote it so I could sleep. Like, I don't need to know your name, but I'm going to tell you about me. I'm going to tell you about my journey. I'm going to tell you that your assumptions are not right. So I wrote it, and I have a journalist friend on Facebook, and she's like, do you care if I publish this? I cover the Silicon Valley, and I'm on this little online newspaper thing, and do you care if I go ahead and publish this? And I said, well, how many likes do you usually get, or like exposure? And she's like, I get a couple hundred. And she's like, we can do it anonymous if you want. And I'm like, no, you put my picture against my story just because out of principle, this guy's, I'm going to put my picture out there. And the funny thing about that picture, the reason I love that picture is I was actually in Tokyo and I needed bio pictures, and my 23-year-old son was with me, and he was proposing to his girlfriend in Tokyo, who was also with us. And he took pictures. He liked to take photography. And my son told me, he's like, Mom, give me that badass smirk. And I was like, oh, look beautiful but badass all at the same time. So I'm like, women are notorious for not liking their pictures. And I'm like, I'm going to like that picture. I'm going to like me in that picture, what she represents. So it got out there. So she says, can I publish it? And I said, sure. So I'm in Brazil. And all of a sudden, I start seeing the Facebook likes, and I'm getting comments, and it hits like 4,000. And I'm like, ugh. I didn't clear it with my company at all. And it was all positive for them, because I really do adore the opportunities I've had at Danaher. I'm like, oh, what are they going to think? So I'm emailing the investor relations people. I'm emailing corporate HR going, hey, there's something out there. I'm in it. It seems to kind of be going a little viral. And plane lands in Houston. It's at 7,000. And I'm like, oh, my gosh. And by the time it was done, it had 57,000 Facebook likes and been retweeted and shared all over. And it blew my mind. And I got more LinkedIn emails and stories from corporate America you would not believe. I mean, women working at the U.S. Naval Warfare Center, CFOs at Capital One, not just engineers, but like these women were just like, and guys, and all this stuff coming out of the woodwork, all these comments, and I sort of synthesized it down to 3 things that happened. And it's funny with all the Weinstein stuff coming out now. Overwhelmingly, women told me this: you said it out loud. Because this swamp in drag force for my generation has been going on for a while. And you said it out loud, and that didn't make you weak, and that didn't make you the whiny female, but you made it visible. And the reason women don't make it visible is because if you do, you're not going to run to HR with everything, because then you don't fit in. You want to belong, you want to belong, you want to belong. And if I take on HR, if I tackle this, I'm not going to belong. The other thing that was really encouraging to me, I had so many comments from men. I call it the rise of the fathers. And I'm betting on this for the future. I am bullish on this. I want a better world for my daughter. I do not want this to happen to my daughter. Now, those of you who, go look up Dear Google Manifesto if you haven't read it. It's basically me talking about my journey all the way back to being 10 and going, you know what? There is no scientific study that women don't choose math and science. That's BS. There is no single variable study. And there is huge stress in a workforce that is not diverse. When you're standing up in front of a crowd and you don't see anybody like you out there, or you walk in a room, highly stressful. The other thing that was encouraging is the P&Gers, man, had these retired P&G guys. They have these dinners. This one's a director, and he emailed me. He goes, Melissa, I read that at the dinner that we hold with all these retired P&Gers. And he goes, I've never been so proud to be a part of that company. We were high-fiving each other because we were taught that 20 years ago about job selection and how you do not discriminate against women being pregnant or young or otherwise. And I mean, to this day, I am highly loyal to P&G. I buy all P&G products, unlike my avoiding Conoco. I walk right down the Tide and the Cascade because that is a fantastic company. I almost did a follow-up piece that said, hey, Google, anybody have a Google Home? I was actually a little afraid they were listening to me for a while, but I was like, Google, I like your products. I just think your culture might need a correction. But I was going to write a piece called "Okay Google, Time to Phone a Friend," P&G. So this is my last slide here, and I'll just talk with you, open up to questions. I talked way longer than I intended. I call this my work-life patchwork. People talk about work-life balance. I actually hate that term because it sounds like a teeter-totter to me, like something's winning, something's losing, and getting it perfectly balanced is hard. I call this my patchwork quilt. They all intersect. You hear people say things like merge. It's the merge. I choose where to put my boundaries down, and I choose where not to, and I let my work life and my personal life kind of all thread together. Over here is my husband, who's a rock star and a saint, and still with me, and still loves me as far as I know. Put up with all my crazies. There's my daughters, while I'm working on a presentation. Here's me in India. Here's the plant I used to run. And my daughter, I have a rule, my kids can come in my office anytime they want. It's never locked. They know how to be quiet in a conference call. They know how to sit on the couch. And sometimes my office is also American Girl headquarters. So anyhow, that's me, guys. Questions, thoughts? Thanks for letting me share all that. That felt good, get all that out. Here's another favorite book of mine, by the way, called Playing Big by Tara Moore. It's focused on women's leadership, practical wisdom for women who want to speak up, create, and lead. It's another good one. Our company, and we're on the journey, like a lot of corporate America, and I will say I've seen a lot of guys feel very uncomfortable because they don't want to feel like they're doing anything wrong either, but they sort of, like, wait a minute, women do have the babies, and there is these real drag forces, and so, like, isn't this real? I think that it's constant education. We have a program we call Building Inclusive Leaders. It's a fantastic program. And they made us all take tests before we walk in. There's like an online, I don't know, it was Harvard or who did it, but it's like your automatic response between you associate women with home or these different things. And they'll throw the stats up. Everybody in this room, this is how you naturally view where women should be or how they fit. But this person said something really powerful, the trainer. She said, you're not responsible for your first thought, because all of us have bias. You are responsible for your second. So if you have these views and you can't untwist them, and it's sort of like, well, I was brought up this way, or you're struggling with that, it's okay. Give yourself some peace, but you don't propagate them. You don't propel them. Keep them to yourself, But, I kind of wonder what that guy's like in person. I'm really curious about that, because he sort of appropriately, Google fired him. I think they should have, because he was propagating very harmful views, in my opinion, but they were so subtle. I would encourage two things. Every company or bigger ones, started with the smaller ones, have speak up programs where they want, any company worth its mettle wants you to protect their reputation and their culture. And I actually think it's okay to, it's hard when you want to be included, right? It's hard when you just, believe me, a lot of my career you don't say anything, you smile. You want, because I don't want them to kick me out like I'm not one of the guys. There's no joke you could tell me that would not offend, because I've heard it all, right? Very locker roomy kind of feeling. But when I became president, and all my peers, who I had to sit in a room and listen to them, say negative things about women or other cultures or what have you, I became president. The VP of sales have been there 40 years, and we're still really good friends. But he would say things that I just found not acceptable. And when I became president, I said, guys, not on my watch, not in my house. And I gave him a 2 on, we have like a kind of a leadership anchor thing. I gave him a 2 on integrity out of 5. And I sat down with him and I said, here's why. And he got it. Next meeting, he started to say something and I looked at him and he went, he just stopped, Because you do have to stop it. And this is why getting more women in leadership roles, I think, will help stop some of it. But I encourage you to find your way to speak up. Yeah, you work it, right? Figure it out. Yeah. And yeah. And most people, they'll feel kind of convicted if you bring it up. Kind of like, even if you're just sort of, I had a boss who told me the power's in your questions, not your statements. You say, really? Is that how you feel about these people? And all of a sudden they start to shrink. No, we've agreed to disagree. And the funny part of that is I love them. Chip here, he knows my parents. I love them dearly, but they're never going to change. I gave my mother talking points that she's allowed to talk with me about work and don't deviate from the script, okay, literally. Because I said, I don't want to hear about the kids. Oh, another trip, what about the kids, Their dad's with them. They're fine, they're eating as far as I know, and they're getting a bath and they're okay, So when I became president, it was funny because my aunt called me up and I kept the message to this day because she calls me up and says, congratulations on becoming first lady. I'm president, but okay, And when I told my mother that statistic about in 2018, that women are going to earn over 50%, I was walking through the airport and I'm like, yeah, Mom, I ran across this study. And my mother literally says, that is the saddest thing I've ever heard. The crumbling of our society. And this last job I took, I said, well, hey, they want me to work for the CEO. And my mother's response was, well, you wouldn't do that, would you? I might. What do you think, Mom? I might. So I told her, I'm like, here's some things you're allowed to say to me, and here's some things you are not. And she's a wonderful person, but they can't understand it. And I'm okay with that. And I want women like my mother in the world. I want women my mother made my wedding dress, and she can cook fantastic meals, and she loves her role in the home. I want that too, you know what I mean? Like, I want to have respect for that. I want to be able to understand her job, even if she'll never understand mine. In my early career, longer than I should have sometimes, I had a real combative style to me early on. Maybe from playing football, like I felt I had to fight. And I actually realized that my power wasn't fighting that hard. When I walked off my job in Germany, I worked for somebody that was terrible, no longer with my company. I have a coach that I still use to this day, and she's wonderful. And I literally told her, I'm like, what my rule is now? Work for no more assholes. And she's like, write that on a sticky note and you put it on your computer. And I did. I was there for like 2 years, Now, no, I don't stick it out. And I wish walking off my job when I did was the best thing I ever did for myself. Because I learned how to fix me a little bit where I needed fixed. And less is more, and honestly quit fighting so hard. You know, it's changing. And I even felt convicted, frankly, reading a leadership book about 2 years ago, because what happens is when there's fewer women and you're fitting into this male world and you're like, okay, I'm in, I fit in. Then you see another girl walk in the room, and if she's on the other end of the feminine spectrum especially, oh my gosh, please no, you're making us all look bad. Oh good God, she looks like a girl in here, you know. Or this kind of queen beast, you know, phenomena of, you know what, no crying in business. I had to pull up my big boy pants to get in here, so you pull them up and you act like a man and you know, that's not diversity. I don't want every woman to have to grow up playing football with the boys, and I'm odd, I know that, okay? Nobody should have to fight that hard. So it's changing dramatically. I think there's a huge movement. If you look at this, I mean, I'm bullish on the demographics. You know, women are earning more college degrees. They're taking on more professional positions. Like, the wave is coming. It just can't not come. And so I think as the wave is coming, there's more and more women supporting each other for sure. I read this book, though, and I thought, in fact, one of the hardest things to get going at a corporation or women's resource group, because the women at the top are like, you're going to ask me to be associated with a women's group? You know? So it's being okay with that. But I want the full range of femininity in the room. In fact, one other quick story on that. I hired this Harvard MBA. She was brilliant. Very girly, though. Kind of ponytail in, just very girly. And we're sitting in a conference room. And for some reason, like a cricket pops out of the ceiling, lands near her. You know, and she is freaking out, like just hates bugs, like one of these kind of reactions, you know, and she's like, like losing her mind, and the guys are kind of like, seriously? And I just went over, and I stomped on the bug, and she was so, you know, felt so bad later, and I took her outside later, I gave her a big hug, I said, you know what, you be the girl who screams at the bugs, I'll be the girl that stomps on them, we're both welcome here. You know, that was a perfectly human response you just had, and you are a genius, and you graduated from Harvard, so don't ever apologize for screaming because a cricket jumped on you. I think the generational diversity is as interesting a subject as the gender diversity. There's a lot going on. In fact, I read, you know, Chip and I were talking about we're just right in the middle, Gen X. And I heard somebody say, the sad, forgotten middle child, you know, millennials and boomers are like, you know, raging with each other. You know, we're in the middle, trying to adapt, trying to be a peacemaker. So, you know, the other thing I've run into is when I was at P&G, the only women I saw in upper management had cats. Like, you just didn't choose to have kids in a career. So I have run into women, I don't feel like I do now as much, but I ran into women that were like, how dare you, like they chose to not have kids, which I totally respect. Again, I talked to a women's group the other day, and a bunch of the women who chose not to have kids said, why do we keep associating motherhood and female leadership? Like, stop it, separate the two out. But I ran into some women that were like, how dare you choose to have both? Like, that's not allowed. That is not allowed. But I also think, like, we just have to keep in us, you know, being good examples, you know, and just, guy in the white hat wins, I always say. You just go around the bad people who are trying to hold each other down. I love millennials, by the way. Love them. I have 3 of them myself. You know what I love about you guys? You are the first generation who, I mean, if you look at the trend of attitudes, you guys are like this funny inflection point. Like, it's real. I love it. And the reason is that you know, you believe in equality on every front. You know, whether it's sexual identity or it's, you know, who your partner is or any of it. So, you know, millennials get a bad rap, in my opinion. I'm kind of, you know, I actually don't allow millennial bashing in my company. I'm like, knock it off. You know, the studies show that they are 20% more productive when they get moving. But sometimes they just kind of have a hard time getting started without perfect information. But in terms of gender, I think the X's and the millennials, we're going to like unite and crack this thing. That's what I'm bullish on. Like, right? Gen X and millennials unite, superpowers. And any boomers that want to come along. But I'm not counting on you to join my team in every case. Oh, yeah, and I guess you say that in my manifesto a little bit. Mine's, yeah, it was. And in fact, and I hope they don't do this to, and I was told it was a tradition. I hope it's not. But my first day at Mines, when you walk through the cafeteria, if you were a woman, they would pound on the table. Like the cafeteria, you're a freshman. And I can still tell you what I was wearing that day because I felt bad. And I did not wear anything inappropriate whatsoever. But I was walking through going, why did I wear this color? Why are they doing that? Yeah, it was very geeked up. You know this. I mean, it was a weird place. The ratio was 5-to-1 men to women. So you had this whole like 18 to 22 dudes who some of them had never had girlfriends, you know, mixed together with bias and craziness. And I had a stalker when I was 19. Still don't know who it was, putting creepy things under my door. My dad wanted me to quit for a while. But I ran into a really sexist professor, frankly. And right after I had that stalker at Mines, I had a professor, and I was our leadership course. And he wanted us to read North Dallas 40. Anybody read North? He was a sports dude, so he thought all leadership came out of sports. And I'm like, where is Gandhi, please? So he had us read this book, North Dallas 40, and it had these scenes in there about women stripping and the football players going nuts and all this stuff. And I refused to read it after this stalker incident. And I went to him and I went to his office, I said, I refuse to read it. And he said, then you're gonna get an F on that. I said, I don't care. By the way, the head of the department is a woman, and I'm taking it up with her because this book is crap. And I said, you know, I'm already in a culture of too much of this, and here you are feeding it. And he was like, I dare you, like this is leadership. I said, no, it isn't. So I went to her, Barb, what was her name? Barb Olson. And I pleaded my case, and she said, you don't have to read that book. I'm going to make sure he does not give you can choose whatever other leadership book you want to read and write a paper on it. So I went to class the next time, and I said, I'm going to read something on Gandhi. And you're going to grade my paper. You know? Actually, that professor and I ended up pretty good friends because he was from Cincinnati. So when I went to I used to go in his office. I mean, we had a mutual respect for each other after that. But yeah, Mines was crazy town. I mean, then. I'd like to think it's better. It's 3-to-1 now. I'm very proud of my alma mater. They're 3-to-1 now, guys to girls. But yeah, I could get whatever physics study partner I wanted, though. That was the only benefit. No, I'm a skill person first, but I am an equal slate person. And that's one thing that my company, I mean, any good business doesn't want to back off of quality, but that's also saying, well, you know what? Our minority candidates probably just aren't as good. That's what you're saying. You know what I mean? They just can't, there's a little subtle, oh, they're just not quite as good. They must not be subtlety in there. So one thing we're pushing is what we call an equal slate. So any slate we see will, and this isn't just women, it's people of color, you know, the lesbian and gay community. I mean, we will, if people want to share that, so we go after equal slate. You know, if you don't have an equal slate coming in, you don't have a shot at it. And that's part of the problem, is people hire people just like them. Your friends are a lot like you. I mean, it's human nature, you know? You look like me, I like you, you know? I'll walk into businesses sometimes, I'll be like, oh my gosh, they all look alike. What happened here? That's great. That's fantastic. I think, too, there's a lot of studies right now about the importance of diversity to drive innovation. I mean, they've mathematically shown that more diverse boards, more diverse leadership teams, those companies outperform. You have more ideas coming in the room. Just more friction creates better ideas. And so there's a huge push around, making sure you got diversity to drive innovation too in product development or what have you. So I think corporate America is going to figure this out. I really do. We're just, is it better than it was 10 years ago in some respects? But I also think we're just getting to the tip of the wave to push it over. Got some work to do still, though. But at least we're talking about it. I think a lot of most Fortune 500 companies are talking about it. It's a big topic in Silicon Valley now, right? They're saying a more diverse Facebook would have caught some of these Russian ads, targeted at trying to rev up the African American community. You don't have any African Americans looking at your ad placements. Guess somebody wants to party over there, So there's a lot of discussion around it, I think, now. I also think that the next frontier is this true partnership at home with women's work and men's work, and that's going to be non-existent. There's a reality to having a family in terms of having the kids and the laundry and but how are you going to manage that together? They still show that women new in their careers who have families at home are still doing their not dual income homes. They're doing way more at home than their partner is still. I think that needs to change. He can throw a load of laundry in or start a crock pot just as good as she can. I'm really for equality on that front. In fact, I was laughing because my husband and I are very reversed. He's a great cook, and I like power tools. I just do. So there's he's out there making a pot roast. It was a couple weeks ago, and I'm out trimming the hedges. I'm like, we are weird. And my kids have only grown up with that though. So my son came home from college his freshman year, comes home for Christmas. I'm holding the baby with a glass of wine. I came home from work. My husband has a big oven mitts on. He's getting cookies out of the oven, and we're talking politics or whatever. And my son sat there and he goes, I had no idea how weird we were till I left home. Like, Mom, you guys aren't normal. I'm like, we're the future. So, all right. Anything else? All right. Well, thanks for letting me talk at you all. Hopefully there's some more snacks out there. Anything else? Somebody?
Thank you so much for asking some great questions.
Thank you.